I hated him, but he was the only one who could save my job. I always believed that I could handle things on my own. I was that person who preferred to keep to myself, avoid office drama, and focus on getting my work done. My colleagues respected me for it, and I had built a reputation as someone who could be relied upon. That was until I was paired with Mark. Mark had been working at the company for a year before I joined. He was everything I wasn't: loud, brash, and always the center of attention. He had a way of walking into a room and immediately making everyone aware of his presence, whether they wanted to or not. I hated him almost instantly. The way he carried himself, the cocky grin on his face, and his tendency to interrupt people made him impossible to be around. I thought I could avoid him, stay out of his way. But when my manager assigned me to work with him on a critical project, I felt like I was being punished. I tried to keep things professional, but Mark made it impossible. Every time I tried to focus, he would crack jokes or offer unsolicited advice. I could feel my patience wearing thin. He constantly undermined my authority, acting like nothing was serious. And as much as I wanted to blow up on him, I knew I had to keep my cool. This project was far too important, and I couldn't afford to let him get under my skin. One afternoon, after an entire day of him making sarcastic comments while I tried to finalize a report, I snapped. "Mark, can you please take this seriously?" I said, trying to hold back my frustration. "We're on a deadline, and I can't afford to waste time with your jokes." Mark looked at me, his smile not faltering. "Relax, Emma. We've got this. You just need to chill out." I clenched my fists, feeling the anger bubble up inside me. But I couldn't afford to lose my composure. I just needed to finish the job and get away from him. If only it were that simple. For the next few weeks, I did everything in my power to avoid him outside of work hours. I buried myself in my tasks, trying to ignore him as he continued to joke around and act as though nothing mattered. But as much as I hated working with him, I couldn't ignore the fact that he was damn good at his job. His ideas, no matter how arrogantly delivered, were often the ones that solved our biggest problems. And despite myself, I found myself listening more carefully to his input. There was one instance late one evening when we were both still at the office, trying to figure out a technical issue that had been holding us back for days. I had been staring at the problem for hours, my mind beginning to feel like mush, when Mark came over, sat down at my desk and started to type away on my keyboard. "Hey," I protested. "What are you doing?" He barely looked up. "You've been at this for hours. You're too close to the problem. Let me handle it." I wanted to argue, but something in his demeanor told me that he knew what he was doing. So, I sat back and watched as he quickly found a solution to the issue, one that I had completely missed. I was both frustrated and amazed. He had done it again. Saved the day with his unorthodox style and confident approach. "See?" Mark said, leaning back in his chair with that smug grin of his. "Told you not to stress." I wanted to shout at him, to tell him that he hadn't solved the problem, just avoided it with his easy attitude. But instead, I just stared at the screen, stunned by how easily he had solved it. I had been so focused on doing things right, while Mark seemed to approach everything with a level of confidence that I couldn't quite grasp. That night, as I walked out of the office, I couldn't stop thinking about what had happened. I hated his attitude, but damn it, he was good at what he did. I hated that I needed him, but I knew I had to swallow my pride if I wanted this project to succeed. After that night, things started to shift. I still hated Mark, but I couldn't deny his value to the team. As the project moved forward, I found myself relying on him more and more. His quick thinking, his ability to stay calm under pressure, and his relentless drive started to make him someone I could lean on despite my better judgment. However, our working relationship wasn't without its struggles. The tension between us was palpable, and even though we were technically partners, there was still an underlying animosity. Mark would tease me, poke fun at my seriousness, and make snarky comments whenever I tried to focus. It grated on my nerves, but I did my best to ignore him and stay on track. One afternoon, during a particularly heated debate over a presentation, things finally came to a head. "I don't get it, Mark," I said, slamming my hands on the desk in frustration. "Why do you always act like everything is a joke? This is important." Mark leaned back in his chair, a smirk tugging at his lips. "Emma, you need to stop taking everything so seriously. We're gonna crush this presentation, okay? We've got this." His dismissiveness pushed me over the edge. "No, Mark, we don't have this. I need you to actually work with me, not just keep trying to act like everything is fine when it's not." Mark's smirk faded, and for the first time I saw a flicker of something different in his eyes. It wasn't the usual arrogance, it was something more vulnerable. "Fine," he said quietly. "I get it. You think I'm just messing around, but I'm not. We're a team now, whether you like it or not." I stared at him, trying to understand what had just happened. For the first time, he had acknowledged our partnership not just as coworkers, but as people who had to rely on each other. Something about that moment changed everything. We were no longer at odds. The tension had shifted into something else, of something more cooperative, albeit still tense. It wasn't just the project that kept us together, it was the constant clash of personalities. We were both stubborn, both determined to prove our worth. But while I tried to stick to the plan, Mark always seemed to breeze through the chaos, barely breaking a sweat. The way he handled pressure was something I couldn't quite understand. Over the next few weeks, we fell into a strange rhythm. We worked together sort of, but every step of the way felt like a battle. I was focused on the details, painstakingly analyzing every piece of data, while Mark would come in and cut through everything with broad strokes. It drove me insane, but I started to notice that his method worked. Despite my meticulous approach, it was his big picture thinking that got us through the hardest parts of the project. One afternoon, we were in the middle of a critical meeting with the executives presenting our progress. Mark had insisted on taking the lead, as usual, despite me feeling that I should be the one presenting the figures. As soon as he started speaking, I felt that old frustration bubble up. His confident tone, his casual approach, it all made me want to rip my hair out. But then something unexpected happened. As he spoke, I saw the executives nodding along. They were buying into his vision. For the first time, I realized that maybe, just maybe, he was right. Maybe his carefree attitude wasn't just arrogance. Maybe it was the thing that made him successful. By the time we finished the presentation, Mark had won over the room. I, on the other hand, was left in the background, quietly seething at the fact that I couldn't hold his attention the way he had commanded theirs. I had never been great at thinking on my feet, and I always had to meticulously prepare for moments like these. But Mark had a natural ability to work the room. Afterward, Mark walked up to me, giving me one of those cocky grins I'd come to despise. "See? Told you we had this." I forced a smile, but inside I was torn. I was pissed off that he had outshone me, but at the same time I couldn't help but feel a strange sense of admiration for him. I hated to admit it, but there was something about him that made everything easier. "You were fine," I muttered, avoiding his gaze as I gathered my things. Mark raised an eyebrow. "Just fine? Come on, Emma. I thought we were getting somewhere here. We're a team, remember?" His words made me stop in my tracks. He had said the word team with sincerity, but I wasn't sure if I could trust him. The truth was, I was still annoyed. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that we had been functioning as a team whether I liked it or not. It wasn't just me carrying the weight. It was both of us working together, even if we didn't always see eye to eye. "Yeah, we are a team," I said quietly, more to myself than to him. "But that doesn't mean I like it." Mark chuckled, clearly not taking offense. "Fair enough, but you can't deny that we're getting somewhere." I couldn't deny that. The project was moving forward at a pace I hadn't expected. In spite of my initial reluctance to work with Mark, we were getting results. Still, it didn't change the fact that every time I worked with him, I felt like I was being dragged along for the ride. As the weeks passed, things started to change in unexpected ways. The tension between Mark and I started to fade, replaced by something else: strange understanding. I wouldn't go so far as to call us friends, but we had found a rhythm in our work. The more I allowed myself to trust him, the more I realized that maybe, just maybe, we weren't so different after all. But just when I thought we were getting somewhere, things took a turn. It happened one afternoon, when we were deep into a strategy meeting. I had just presented a new idea I'd been working on, something I felt could take the project to the next level. It was bold and risky, but it had the potential to pay off in a big way. I could feel the eyes of everyone in the room on me, waiting for feedback. Mark, however, wasn't impressed. He leaned back in his chair and shrugged. "Not bad, but we've done this before," he said dismissively. I was taken aback. What do you mean? We've done this before. This is a completely new approach. I don't know, Emma, he said, his voice oozing with that same arrogance. It feels like you're just recycling the same old ideas. We need something more original. I could feel my cheeks flush with anger. I'd spent days perfecting that idea, and here he was, shooting it down without so much as a second thought. It was like he didn't care about the effort I'd put into it. And maybe that was the worst part, the fact that he had no idea how much it meant to me. You don't get it, do you? I snapped, unable to keep my cool. This isn't about what we've done before. It's about moving forward, trying something new. Mark's expression shifted slightly, but he didn't back down. It's not about trying something new, Emma. It's about what works. You want to take risks? Fine, but make sure they're calculated. I stood up, my fists clenched. I'm not going to keep playing it safe just because you're afraid of failure. The room fell silent, and for a moment, it felt like everything was hanging in the balance. The tension between Mark and I had always been there, simmering beneath the surface. But now it was out in the open. This wasn't just about the project anymore. It was personal. Mark finally stood up, his eyes meeting mine with a kind of intensity I hadn't seen before. Emma, I'm not afraid of failure. I'm just tired of seeing you waste your energy on things that don't matter. My heart skipped a beat, but I didn't want to show him that he had gotten to me. Well, maybe I'm not like you. Maybe I actually care about what I do. I know you care, he said quietly, but you're going to have to learn to let go a little. Not everything has to be perfect. I stared at him, trying to process his words. For a moment, I thought he might be right. Maybe I had been too focused on getting everything just right, but I wasn't sure if I was ready to change. As I sat back down, I realized something. Mark wasn't just challenging my ideas. He was challenging the way I saw myself, and it terrified me. As we moved closer to the final stages of the project, the strain between Mark and me reached its peak. The tension wasn't just professional anymore, it was personal. Every interaction felt like a battle. Every word we exchanged seemed to have more weight than it should. And yet, despite everything, I couldn't deny that we had both become indispensable to each other. One late night, as we stayed at the office working on the final presentation, Mark and I had another heated argument. I don't understand you, Emma, Mark said, his voice low but firm. You keep acting like this project is your entire life. It's not. It's just work. I shook my head. You don't get it. If I don't give my all, I'll never get ahead. I'm not like you, Mark. I can't just coast through life and expect everything to fall into place. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. I'm not saying you should coast. I'm saying you're killing yourself over something that doesn't matter that much. I felt my chest tighten. Maybe that's the problem. Maybe I care too much. Mark was quiet for a moment, and when he spoke again, his tone was softer. Look, I get it. But you've got to find a balance. You're too good to burn yourself out like this. I couldn't stop thinking about Mark's words. He was right, sort of. I'd been so consumed by perfection, by proving myself, that I had started to forget why I was doing this in the first place. I wasn't just fighting for the project. I was fighting for my place in the world, my worth. But was it worth losing everything else in the process? The more I thought about it, the more I realized I didn't know the answer. That week, the final presentation was scheduled. The executives had high expectations, and everyone on our team was tense. It felt like the culmination of everything we'd worked for, and Mark and I had to present together. It was supposed to be the big moment where we showed everyone that all the hours, all the sacrifice had paid off. But something inside me was different now. I wasn't the same person who had walked into this project months ago, desperate to prove my worth. I wasn't even sure if I cared about proving anything anymore. On the morning of the presentation, Mark walked in, looking as casual as ever. He greeted me with that same cocky grin, but there was something in his eyes, a flicker of concern maybe, or maybe just exhaustion. He was tired of this too, but he hid it well. We had always been different, but now I could see the cracks in his armor. You ready for this? He asked, breaking the silence as we sat down to review the slides one last time. I nodded, trying to push the anxiety out of my chest. Yeah, I guess. Mark didn't respond right away. He just watched me with those sharp, assessing eyes. You're not as confident as usual, he said. You okay? The question caught me off guard. It was strange, hearing concern in his voice after all the tension between us. I opened my mouth to brush it off, but the words didn't come out. Instead, I found myself exhaling slowly, letting the weight of everything settle on my shoulders. "I don't know, Mark," I finally admitted. "I've been working so hard, but I don't even know what I'm trying to prove anymore." He leaned back in his chair, his expression softening. "I get it, but you don't have to prove anything to anyone. You've already done more than enough." I stared at him, surprised. "You think so?" "I know so," he said. "You're one of the most driven people I've ever met. But sometimes you need to let go of the need for perfection. It's killing you." His words lingered in the air, and for the first time in a long time, I actually listened. Maybe, just maybe, I had been so caught up in the idea of being perfect that I hadn't allowed myself to enjoy any of this. The meeting went as planned. Mark and I presented together, as we always did. But this time, something felt different. I wasn't just following Mark's lead. I was more in control of my own part of the presentation. We weren't fighting against each other anymore. Instead, we were working together in a way that I hadn't expected. When it was over, the executives seemed pleased. We'd done it. We'd pulled it off. But when the room cleared out and Mark and I were alone, I could feel the tension building again. Not because of anything that had happened in the meeting, but because of the silence between us. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know if this moment would be the end of the strange competitive relationship we had or the beginning of something new. "Thanks," I said, finally breaking the silence. "For everything." Mark raised an eyebrow, clearly not expecting me to be so open. "For what?" "For being a pain in my ass," I said, the corner of my mouth twitching into a smile. "For making me see things from a different perspective." Mark laughed. "I'm not always a pain, am I? Most of the time," I said with a smirk. "But I guess I needed it." He looked at me for a moment, and I could see that something had shifted. We weren't just colleagues anymore. Maybe we were even friends. Or maybe we had just learned to accept each other, flaws and all. "We did good, didn't we?" Mark said quietly. "Yeah," I replied, my voice steady. "We did." Weeks passed, and the project became a success. It wasn't without its challenges, but Mark and I managed to find a way to work together without all the tension, without the need for constant conflict. Things didn't magically become perfect. We still had our differences, but we learned how to communicate, how to respect each other's strengths. I wasn't afraid of Mark anymore, and he wasn't afraid of me. As for the rest of the team, they noticed the change too. The once fraught dynamic between Mark and me became something more productive. We didn't fight for dominance anymore. We fought for the success of the team. Eventually, Mark left for another opportunity, taking on a new challenge. It was bittersweet, to be honest. I had grown to appreciate the time we spent working together, and I knew that I'd never forget the lessons I learned from him. He had pushed me in ways that no one else had, but he had also shown me that there was more to success than just being the best. And as for me, I continued to rise in my career. But I wasn't the same person I had been before. I had learned to let go of my obsession with perfection and embrace the idea that mistakes weren't the end of the world. It was part of the process, part of learning and growing. We may have started as rivals, but in the end, we were something more, something unexpected, but exactly what we needed. If you like this video, please subscribe for more.